It was a suffocating July night in 1977. Outside, a barn roared with fire. But it was the farmhouse, glowing like an unnatural beacon in the oppressive darkness, that truly held the terror. Every single kerosene lamp within its walls had been lit, casting a strange flickering light onto a scene no one could fully comprehend. A woman, 8 months pregnant, lay still, not in her nightclothes, but in the dozens of pins and layers of her full daytime attire. Her husband wept, his words speaking of a weak heart. As neighbors surveyed the impossible scene, in the heart of Ohio's Amish country, where time often seems to stand still, lives a community that keeps its own counsel. Problems are handled internally, under the watchful eye of God. But sometimes, even faith cannot fully conceal the shadow of human darkness, especially when it takes root within. This is a tale of a silence broken by lies, of lives extinguished, and of a mystery that still echoes across decades. Before we delve into this chilling narrative, tell us in the comments below where you're watching from today. Tonight, on Host of Silence, we pull back the veil on a story buried deep within the quiet lands of Ohio. Wayne County, Ohio, was a patchwork of green and gold fields intersected by narrow, unpaved roads. Along these arteries, horse-drawn buggies moved with a rhythmic clip-clop, occasionally sharing the dusty path with a weathered pickup truck, a concession to the modern world that felt more like an anomaly than an integration. This was the territory of the Schwartzentruber Amish, a community distinguished even among other Amish sects for its unwavering adherence to tradition and its profound insulation from the outside world. Here, life followed an ancient cadence, dictated by the seasons, the demands of the land, and the unyielding tenets of faith. Every furrow plowed, every meal shared, every quiet moment of existence was believed to unfold under the silent, ever-present scrutiny of God into this ordered, self-contained world. Eli Stutzman Jr. was born on September 20th, 1950, as the son of a respected Amish bishop. His future seemed predestined, carved from the same solid granite of obedience and communal harmony that defined his lineage. Yet from his earliest years, Eli walked a path distinct from the quiet conformity expected of him. While other young boys learned the rhythms of the farm, their hands growing calloused from milking cows and guiding plows, Eli cultivated a different kind of skill. He lied, not with malice, perhaps, but with an unsettling, almost artless compulsion. His childhood was reportedly peppered with elaborate fabrications, fantastical narratives that emerged unbidden, often serving to challenge the quiet authority of his elders or to skirt the edges of responsibility. There were times, it was noted by those who observed him closely, when a vacant quality seemed to settle in his eyes, a momentary absence that created a subtle, unsettling chasm between his words and the perceived truth. Such observations, however, rarely ventured beyond the quiet corners of the mind. The Amish, by their very nature, addressed their trials internally, preferring to keep their community's struggles shielded from the prying eyes of outsiders. The communal embrace, though profound, eventually proved too restrictive for Eli. In 1974, at the age of 24, circumstances propelled him beyond its familiar borders for the first time. Reports, later whispered among those who sought to piece together his early movements, indicated that Eli had become ensnared in a drug operation. His involvement reportedly stretched to acting as an informant for law enforcement officials in a marijuana case. The arrangement, delicate and fraught with peril, reportedly unraveled. With its collapse, Eli found himself in a desperate bind. A series of events then unfolded in which Eli claimed to have been brutally assaulted, ostensibly stabbed, by unknown individuals. He presented himself to the authorities, reportedly detailing the attack with a vividness that initially seemed convincing. However, a later review by investigators reportedly revealed unsettling inconsistencies. The wounds Eli displayed, while real, were reportedly determined to be self-inflicted, not the result of an external assailant. The revelation of this staged attack, coupled with the crumbling drug operation, left Eli exposed, adrift, and without a viable path forward in the outside world. With options dwindling, a solitary refuge remained. He returned to his father's farm, seeking the protective anonymity afforded by the Amish faith, a place where he might once again disappear into the collective. With the strictures of tradition, offered a shield against the consequences of his actions. It was in this period of return, cloaked in a veneer of repentant humility, that Eli encountered Ida Gingrich. She represented, in almost every discernible way, the antithesis of the troubled young man. Ida, a woman of 26, embodied a gentle earnestness, a profound and genuine devotion that radiated from her quiet demeanor. Her aspirations were those deeply rooted in the Amish tradition: a loving family, a harmonious household, a life lived in humble service. Ida, reportedly drawn by an undefinable quality she perceived within Eli, found herself falling in love. Her heart, pure in its intentions, overlooked what might have been considered subtle warnings. In 1975, despite any lingering doubts that might have been harbored by those around her, Ida Gingrich became Eli Stutzman's wife. Eli's marital life, however, quickly became a labyrinth of secrets and concealed transgressions. Unknown to Ida, Eli reportedly retained a driver's license, a document carefully hidden away, a stark violation of the church's prohibitions against owning and operating motor vehicles. This forbidden credential was reportedly stashed in a worn leather wallet, secreted away from the family home, allowing him a clandestine mobility that defied communal expectations. There were whispers, rarely voiced openly but occasionally circulating among close-knit families, of his periodic disappearances. He would reportedly venture beyond the boundaries of the community, often to meet with men, engaging in activities far removed from the sober, chaste life expected of an Amish husband. Perhaps the most profound of Eli's deceptions occurred prior to their wedding, when mandatory blood tests were required. Eli reportedly falsified his results. He carried the burden of syphilis and gonorrhea, sexually transmitted diseases that remained a devastating secret, diseases that Ida would never know. Her health and trust unknowingly compromised. The early years of their marriage unfolded with a growing sense of isolation for Ida. Eli would vanish for days, sometimes for weeks, leaving her to shoulder the responsibilities of the farm alone. The rhythmic creak of the porch swing often marked the solitary passage of her days, her gaze reportedly lingering on the distant horizon, a silent question etched in her posture. She reportedly pondered why she felt so often insufficient, why her presence seemed unable to anchor him, to bring him lasting contentment. Her parents, Amos and Lizzie Gingrich, along with Ida's younger brother Dan, observed the deepening shadow that seemed to fall over their daughter's life. They perceived, with growing unease, that something was profoundly wrong within the marriage. Their silent concerns reportedly manifested in concerned glances exchanged across dinner tables, in hushed conversations late into the night. Yet, within the strictures of Amish culture, the dissolution of a marriage was almost unthinkable. Outsiders, especially law enforcement, were never to be involved. All matters, particularly those of a marital or familial nature, were to be resolved internally, within the community, under the unblinking, all-seeing eye of God. The unspoken mandate of their faith compelled their silence. The night of July 29, 1977, descended upon the Wayne County farmhouse with a heavy, oppressive stillness. The air hung thick and humid, a stifling blanket draped over the fields. Ida, now 8 months pregnant, carried the weight of impending motherhood, her body preparing for the new life stirring within. Around 9 in the evening, as the last vestiges of twilight faded, Ida and Eli reportedly retired for the night. Just past midnight, a violent interruption shattered the farm's customary quiet. Flames, the barn, a large and essential structure on the homestead, had erupted into a roaring inferno. Its hungry, orange glow pulsed against the velvet blackness of the night, casting grotesque, dancing shadows across the fields and illuminating the frantic figures of neighbors arriving from nearby farms, drawn by the ominous light and the smell of burning timber. As they approached the farmhouse, a truly peculiar sight met their eyes. Every single kerosene lamp within the house, each one, without exception, burned brightly. The entire dwelling pulsed with an eerie, unnatural radiance, a stark beacon in the suffocating darkness, its many windows gleaming like watchful eyes. Eli, his face streaked with soot and tears, his voice reportedly choked with grief, claimed that Ida had been the one to rouse him from sleep. He then stated she had rushed out towards the burning barn ahead of him. Neighbors observed his apparent distress, his attempts to convey the sudden, overwhelming horror of the situation. However, when Ida's body was finally discovered, carefully carried from the adjacent milk house, a small structure located next to the raging barn fire, a stark and perplexing contradiction emerged. She was found fully dressed in her complete daytime attire, not in a nightgown. For an Amish woman, the process of dressing involved numerous layers of clothing, meticulously secured with dozens of straight pins. It was a deliberate, time-consuming ritual, one that would consume many minutes, not mere moments. Yet Eli maintained she had left the house before him, seemingly having completed this elaborate process in an impossible span of time. The neighbors, their faces grim and somber in the flickering firelight, carefully moved Ida's body away from the scorching heat of the inferno. Eli sobbed openly, reportedly claiming that Ida possessed a weak heart, that she must have collapsed from the exertion, the shock, or the overwhelming fright of the blaze. His words conveyed a desperate explanation for the tragedy. However, Ida's regular physician, a man who had been attending to her through her pregnancy, and who happened to be away on vacation at the time of the incident, would later express profound shock and disbelief at Eli's assertion. Ida had no known heart condition. None whatsoever had ever been detected or reported in her medical history. The local coroner, Dr. J.T. Questel, arrived at the scene shortly thereafter. His examination, which appeared to be swift and lacking in thoroughness, was reportedly completed without extensive inquiry or detailed investigation. The scene, the presence of the Amish community, and Eli's familial standing as the bishop's son seemed to guide the outcome. The brief inspection concluded swiftly. Dr. Questel formally declared Ida's death as due to natural causes. No one within the tight-knit community, bound by their customs of non-interference and internal resolution, publicly questioned the ruling. No official, in-depth investigation was launched. The unspoken understanding was that the Amish were to manage their own affairs, their grief and their mysteries remaining within their fences. And Eli, despite the shadows that clung to him, remained the son of a respected bishop. Amos and Lizzie Gingerich, Ida's parents, carried their profound grief in the quiet, stoic manner of their faith. They mourned their beloved daughter and the grandchild who would never draw breath. Deep within the recesses of their hearts, a chilling certainty resided, a conviction that Ida had been murdered. Yet they were Amish. For them it was enough that God, in his infinite wisdom, knew the truth. Their faith provided solace, but not, it seemed, a path to worldly justice. Eli, however, continued to weave his tapestry of deception, even in the immediate aftermath of the tragedy. Weeks after the fire, he reportedly penned a letter to another Amish widower who resided in Indiana. In this correspondence, a small but significant detail emerged that unraveled a thread in his carefully constructed narrative. Eli reportedly wrote that officials stated that lightning must have struck the barn in the late afternoon and just smoldered until night. This statement directly contradicted his earlier account, the one he had reportedly offered to neighbors and others at the scene, where he had claimed to have witnessed the lightning strike the barn himself. It was a subtle slip, a momentary fracture in the facade, revealing the continuing pattern of his fabrications. But no one, it seemed, was paying close enough attention to notice the discrepancy, or perhaps no one dared to voice their suspicions. With the quiet burial of Ida and the official ruling of natural causes, Eli Stutzman remained in sole custody of his infant son, Danny. The next chapter of his life, shrouded in the quiet aftermath of tragedy and unanswered questions, had begun. He would soon leave the community, taking his son with him, and the mysteries of that suffocating July night would remain, for a time, buried in the silent fields of Wayne County. Following Ida's quiet burial amidst the rolling hills of Wayne County, a profound and irreversible shift occurred in Eli Stutzman's life. The protective, yet rigidly confining, embrace of the Amish community was abruptly, almost violently, cast off. He departed from the familiar fields, leaving behind the only world he had ever truly known, taking his infant son, Danny, with him. The horse-drawn buggy, an immutable symbol of his former existence and its strictures, was abandoned without a backward glance for the hum of an engine. A vehicle of escape into a world Eli had once only glimpsed from the periphery. This departure signified a definitive severance, a conscious and deliberate break from the traditions and moral codes that had, for so long, both defined and confined him. Danny, a silent, unknowing witness to this radical transformation, was carried along into a new, unmoored existence, his small hand often clutching his father's coat. A tiny anchor in a world of constant motion, their new path became a restless, winding journey across the vast and diverse American landscape. The familiar ordered green of Ohio farmland gave way to the sweeping, open expanses of Wyoming, a state of raw, untamed beauty. From there, they moved to the rugged, awe-inspiring peaks of Colorado, where mountains scraped the sky before the dry, often oppressive heat of Texas became a recurring, if temporary, backdrop to their lives. They reportedly moved through a succession of small towns, each blurring into the next, and anonymous motels, their meager belongings perpetually packed into the back of a vehicle. They never truly settled, never put down roots, a permanent address becoming a phantom concept. For Eli, this nomadic existence offered a profound, almost intoxicating anonymity, a stark contrast to the communal scrutiny and ever-present judgment of his Amish past. In the wider, more tolerant world, far from the watchful, conservative eyes of the community he had abandoned, he reportedly embraced his own identity with an openness that would have been utterly unthinkable within the Amish fold. His movements often led him to specific locations, to dimly lit bars or discreet social gatherings, places frequented by men seeking companionship. These connections, sometimes fleeting encounters, sometimes more sustained relationships, were reportedly initiated through carefully worded advertisements placed in certain underground or alternative magazines, publications catering to a subculture Eli had previously been forced to suppress. This new life, unburdened by the stringent rules and moral codes of his past, appeared to offer a freedom Eli had seemingly longed for with an almost desperate intensity. He navigated this new reality with a casual confidence, often wearing a charming, easy smile and speaking with a soft, almost hypnotic voice that many found disarming, an appealing facade that drew people in. Yet, as Eli and Danny drifted from state to state, leaving behind a transient, almost ephemeral imprint wherever they went, a deeply disquieting pattern reportedly began to emerge in their wake. Men Eli had reportedly met, or with whom he had been seen in various towns across the country, sometimes vanished without a trace. Their disappearances, initially dismissed by authorities in various jurisdictions as personal choices, sudden departures, or simply individuals moving on, began to accumulate. But as the years turned, these seemingly isolated incidents began to form a subtle, unsettling trail, like scattered breadcrumbs leading to unseen dangers. A growing, sinister shadow cast by Eli's movements. The silence around these missing individuals eventually became a heavy, palpable thing. The autumn of 1985 found Eli and Danny in Durango, Colorado, a picturesque town nestled amidst the towering, often snow-capped peaks of the San Juan Mountains. The air was crisp, carrying the sharp, invigorating scent of pine and the distinct promise of impending winter. The town's quiet beauty, however, was violently shattered in November of that year by a chilling discovery. The body of David Tyler, a 36-year-old man who owned a local transmission repair shop, was found in the bed of a pickup truck, a scene that immediately alerted authorities. Tyler was a recognizable and respected figure in the community, known as an openly gay man, living his life without pretense or concealment. Reports from his close friends and acquaintances indicated that, in the weeks leading up to his death, Tyler had been receiving a series of increasingly menacing death threats over the phone. The calls, reportedly from an unidentified individual who expressed a vehement hatred of homosexuals, had deeply unsettled Tyler. The threats had reportedly unnerved him to such an extent that he had begun to carry a firearm for self-protection, a clear measure of his genuine and escalating fear. He had last been seen alive at a local Holiday Inn, reportedly meeting with someone he had recently connected with through one of the aforementioned discreet advertisements. Chief Chris Wiggins, leading the Durango Police Department, along with Sergeant Tony Arcolita, a patrol officer recently promoted to detective work, immediately launched an intense investigation into Tyler's death. They meticulously processed the scene, carefully gathered forensic evidence, interviewed a wide array of acquaintances, colleagues, and potential witnesses, and attempted to reconstruct Tyler's final, fateful hours. The chilling threats Tyler had described added a sinister, complex layer to the unfolding mystery, strongly suggesting a motive steeped in hatred and bigotry. The community, though small and generally tranquil, was profoundly shaken by the brutality and apparent targeted nature of Tyler's murder. Less than a month later, in December 1985, another tragic event unfolded in Durango, further deepening the town's pervasive sense of unease and vulnerability. Dennis Sleater, a 24-year-old university student who worked part-time at a local liquor store to help with expenses, was found dead in the establishment's basement. He had been shot. Initial police assessments, led by Chief Wiggins, quickly leaned towards a robbery gone wrong, a common enough tragedy in any urban or rural setting. However, certain crucial details reportedly failed to align cleanly with this immediate theory, raising red flags for the investigators. Sleater, on the cusp of graduating with a highly sought-after degree in industrial psychology, reportedly did not require the meager income from the liquor store job. He was academically driven, with a promising future laid out before him, suggesting he would not have taken unnecessary risks for a small sum of money. His presence in the store's basement, a less trafficked and more secluded area, and the specific nature of the scene, left some lingering questions that seemed to defy easy categorization within a simple robbery scenario. Detectives from the Durango Police Department, including Sergeant Arcolita, diligently pursued various leads, attempting to piece together Sleater's final moments and the circumstances of his death. Despite their concerted efforts, the anomalies surrounding Sleater's death persisted, preventing a definitive, clear-cut conclusion and leaving the case shrouded in a disturbing ambiguity. During this precise period, the months spanning from late autumn to early winter of 1985, Eli Stutzman was reportedly present in the Durango area. He had reportedly been residing at a nearby ranch, his movements and presence reportedly observed by various individuals within the local community, from ranch hands to proprietors of local businesses. Police investigators, acutely aware of Eli's presence in the town and his reported connections to certain individuals, reportedly brought him in for questioning on multiple occasions. They meticulously attempted to ascertain his activities, his precise whereabouts, and his associations during the crucial periods surrounding both David Tyler's and Dennis Sleater's deaths. Eli, reportedly calm, collected, and cooperative, offered plausible explanations for his time in Durango, describing his transient work selling leather goods and Bible covers. However, despite his undisputed presence in the vicinity of both tragic deaths and the compelling, yet circumstantial, evidence that began to mount, authorities, under Chief Wiggins' command, were reportedly unable to gather sufficient conclusive evidence, such as direct eyewitness testimony or irrefutable forensic links, to directly and formally connect Eli Stutzman to the murders of David Tyler or Dennis Sleater. The cases remained technically unsolved, the shadows of doubt lingering heavily over the town, and a pervasive sense of unease continued to grip the community. Eli, for now, remained free, a figure slipping through the cracks of justice. Prior to the sequence of events that unfolded in Durango in the spring of 1985, Eli had established a temporary residence in Austin, Texas, a sprawling, vibrant city that offered yet another layer of anonymity. There, he had reportedly shared an apartment with Glenn Pritchett, a 24-year-old man who also reportedly worked for Eli, possibly assisting him with various odd jobs, transient sales, or even less legitimate schemes. Their apartment, a modest dwelling in a nondescript complex, was reportedly a hub of sporadic activity, with various individuals coming and going at irregular hours. Then, in May, Glenn Pritchett's body was discovered in a remote ditch outside of Austin, a grim and stark find that abruptly signaled the brutal end of his young life. He had been murdered. The news quickly reached the Austin authorities, and Detective Gary Cutler, a seasoned homicide detective with the Travis County Sheriff's Office, immediately began his investigation into Pritchett's death. Cutler reportedly sought to question Eli Stutzman, given his close association with the victim, expecting him to be a key witness. However, upon arriving at the shared apartment, investigators found it entirely empty, save for a few abandoned personal effects. Eli had vanished. He had fled, taking Danny, now a 9-year-old boy, with him, once again leaving behind a scene of violence and unanswered questions. This sudden flight, following the discovery of Glenn Pritchett's brutally murdered body and Eli's immediate disappearance from Austin, solidified a chilling, discernible pattern. Eli Stutzman was leaving a trail of death and broken lives, followed by swift, silent evasion, a shadow moving ceaselessly across the country. The narrative tension mounted, thick and palpable, a pervasive unease that moved in tandem with Eli and his young son, leaving discarded lives and unresolved mysteries in their turbulent wake. The child, Danny, remained a silent, ever-present observer, his small world defined by constant motion, unspoken truths, and the unsettling, shifting landscape of his father's transient existence. His eyes, often wide and watchful, absorbed fragments of a world he could not yet fully comprehend. Following Eli's abrupt flight from Austin, Texas, leaving behind the chilling discovery of Glenn Pritchett's body, his transient existence took a new turn. With Danny, then a 9-year-old boy, in tow, Eli reportedly journeyed westward once more, arriving in the expansive, sparsely populated state of Wyoming. Here, he made a decision that would prove pivotal in Danny's brief life. Eli left the boy with an adoptive family, a couple residing in a modest home, under the false pretense that he needed to travel for work. He reportedly claimed his occupation involved selling various items, such as Bible covers and leather belts, a trade that necessitated extensive travel and rendered him unable to provide stable care for his son. The couple, touched by Danny's quiet demeanor and seemingly understanding his father's purported professional demands, reportedly welcomed the boy into their home for what was intended to be a 6-month stay for Danny. These 6 months in Wyoming offered a stark contrast to the chaotic, nomadic life he had known with Eli. The adoptive family reportedly provided a sense of stability and routine, a quiet domesticity that had been absent from his existence. Days were filled with simple activities, attending a local school, perhaps making tentative connections with other children. On weekends, Danny reportedly helped out at a local market, his small hands assisting with tasks, his presence a quiet, almost invisible fixture. The family reportedly grew fond of the boy, offering him a warmth and consistent care that seemed to soothe something within him. His quiet nature, a product of his transient past, reportedly began to soften, though the shadow of constant movement and uncertainty still clung to him. He was observed to be a watchful child, his eyes taking in the world around him with a guarded intensity. Meanwhile, Eli, unburdened by the immediate responsibilities of fatherhood, reportedly plunged deeper into a life of self-indulgence and dissipation. His supposed work trips were, in reality, far removed from the sober business of selling religious articles. Reports from various sources indicated that Eli was traveling extensively, indulging in parties, engaging in rampant drug use, particularly crack cocaine, and continuing to seek out men through classified advertisements in various magazines. His life was a blur of transient encounters and fleeting pleasures, a stark counterpoint to the quiet, settled existence Danny was experiencing in Wyoming. The money for his supposed work was likely derived from sources unknown, adding another layer of murkiness to his activities. December 1985 arrived, blanketing parts of Wyoming in the sharp, crystalline cold of winter. As the Christmas season approached, Eli reportedly returned to the adoptive family's home. His presence, after 6 months of absence, reportedly stirred a mix of anticipation and apprehension. Eli informed the couple that he was taking Danny to Ohio, ostensibly to spend Christmas with his Amish family, a narrative that conveniently wove into the boy's original heritage. Before Danny departed, the adoptive family reportedly took a photograph, a simple snapshot capturing a moment in time. Danny, then 9 years old, stood wearing a striped jacket. His eyes, dark and wide, gazed directly into the camera. He was not smiling. It would be the last time they, or anyone outside of Eli, would see Danny alive. The image, frozen in time, would later become a haunting artifact. Eli and Danny then departed from Wyoming, ostensibly heading east towards Ohio. Into the gathering winter, the narrative abruptly shifts, veering away from the western expanses to a desolate, frozen landscape in the heartland. It was Christmas Eve, 1985. Chuck Cleveland, a wholesale oil merchant in Chester, Nebraska, decided to leave work early. The day had been slow, the bitter cold driving people indoors. He stopped by his home to retrieve his shotgun, perhaps hoping to spot a few pheasants on the drive to the barber in nearby Hebron. The temperature hovered far below zero, a punishing 9 degrees below, freezing the very air. The landscape was a desolate expanse of white and muted browns, punctuated by leafless trees and skeletal shrubs. As Chuck drove his pickup truck slowly along a remote dirt road, scanning the snow-dusted horizon for any sign of game, something vibrant caught his eye. A flash of brilliant blue, stark against the muted winter palette, emerged from a brush-filled ravine. He slowed, a vague sense of curiosity stirring, then stopped, reversing his truck to get a clearer view. The blue remained, an unnatural splash of color. Immobile amidst the frozen weeds and snowdrifts, Chuck put his truck in neutral, the engine idling, and stepped out into the biting cold. He walked cautiously to the edge of the ravine, the frozen ground crunching under his boots. At first, his mind struggled to process what he saw. He initially thought it might be a discarded mannequin or a child's large doll, cruelly abandoned. But as he looked closer, the grotesque reality slammed into him with the force of a physical blow. It was a child. A small boy, clad only in a light blue pajama set, lay still in the pristine snow. His tiny hand was reportedly positioned carefully over his heart, as if someone had deliberately arranged him in that manner. His eyes were closed, sealed against the unforgiving cold. Disturbingly, his face bore small, irregular marks, consistent with rodent bites, a gruesome detail in an already horrific scene. The boy was frozen solid, a tragic, silent tableau in the desolate landscape. Chuck stumbled back to his truck, his breath fogging in ragged gasps, and frantically radioed for help. Within minutes, Sheriff Gary Young of Thayer County arrived, his patrol car's lights flashing, cutting through the encroaching dusk. The two men stood at the edge of the ravine, their faces grim, sharing an unspoken horror. They immediately blocked the dirt road for a mile in each direction, securing the scene. The Nebraska State Patrol quickly arrived, their personnel beginning the meticulous process of documenting what was clearly a crime scene. A local doctor, performing the initial autopsy, found himself unable to definitively determine the cause of death. Perhaps, he reportedly speculated, it could have been Ray's syndrome, or perhaps a severe case of hypothermia leading to death by exposure. But Sheriff Young, a man seasoned by years of rural law enforcement, refused to accept such an ambiguous conclusion. Obviously, he didn't walk there, Young reportedly stated, his voice tight with conviction. The profound implausibility of a child, dressed only in pajamas, wandering into such a remote, frozen ravine, underscored his certainty that foul play was involved. The mystery surrounding the boy's death intensified, fueled by the lack of immediate answers that no one, despite frantic inquiries and widespread appeals, knew who the boy was. Investigators distributed sketches and age-enhanced photographs across the country, hoping for a recognition, a clue, any information that might identify the small victim. They contacted the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, disseminating the boy's image far and wide. Yet, week after week, no one recognized him. No one came forward to claim him. No one, it seemed, was looking for him. Chuck Cleveland, the man who had discovered the body, began to refer to the unknown child as Little Boy Blue, a poignant reference to his blue pajamas. The nickname resonated with the shocked community, and it stuck. The story, tragic and haunting, spread nationally, captivating headlines and news reports across the United States. Despite the widespread attention, the boy remained nameless, an anonymous victim of unknown circumstances. Chester, Nebraska, was a small town, numbering only a few hundred souls. But the community, deeply affected by the discovery, made a collective decision. This child would not be buried as a John Doe. A local woman reportedly donated a burial plot in the town cemetery. Other residents, moved by a profound sense of shared grief and compassion, donated a small suit for his burial, flowers for the grave, a child-sized casket, and a simple headstone. More than 500 people, an outpouring of sorrow and solidarity, reportedly crowded into the United Methodist Church for the funeral of a child none of them had known personally. Pastor Jean Samuelson delivered a sermon that many would reportedly never forget. She spoke of the sacred duty to protect children, of the collective responsibility to ensure no child was lost or forgotten. Her words were reportedly both beautiful and devastating, echoing the raw emotion felt by the assembled mourners. They buried the unknown boy, giving him the name Matthew, a name meaning gift of God. The simple, poignant headstone read, "Little boy abandoned found near Chester, Nebraska, December 24th, 1985, at the bottom of the stone." A blank space was intentionally left, a silent testament to the community's enduring hope that one day his true name would be revealed, and the full story of Little Boy Blue might finally be told. Eli, having departed Wyoming with Danny, had yet to reach Ohio, and the path he was on would soon intersect with the tragic anonymity of Chester. Following Eli's abrupt departure from Wyoming with Danny, a profound and deliberate veil of deception descended upon the child's fate. Eli, having explicitly promised the unsuspecting adoptive family that he was transporting Danny to his Amish relatives for a Christmas reunion, never arrived in Ohio with the boy. Instead, he began to meticulously weave a complex and contradictory narrative, a chilling tapestry of falsehoods spun to meticulously obscure Danny's true whereabouts and ultimate destiny. When Eli did eventually surface in Ohio, alone, his Amish family, accustomed to his often erratic movements, reportedly asked about Danny's absence. Eli offered one explanation. He claimed he had supposedly left the boy with Ida's grandparents. This story, while superficially plausible within the intricate web of familial connections, was reportedly met with a quiet, uneasy acceptance, a characteristic response from a community that meticulously avoided outward confrontation and sought internal resolution, even in the face of nagging doubts. Later, when contacted by the concerned adoptive couple in Wyoming, who had grown genuinely fond of the quiet boy and worried about his transition, Eli reportedly offered a different version of events. He calmly stated that Danny had been successfully enrolled in school in Ohio, an assurance carefully calculated to placate their mounting worries. The couple, trusting and entirely unaware of the previous fabrications or Eli's true nature, reportedly accepted this news with a measure of relief, genuinely believing the boy was safe and finally settled into a new life. Then, in 1986, nearly a year after Danny's disappearance, Eli penned a letter to Ida's parents, Amos and Lizzie Gingrich, delivering the most devastating lie of all. With a chilling detachment, he wrote that Danny had tragically died in a car accident in Utah in July. 3 distinct falsehoods, each meticulously crafted to deflect suspicion, to conceal the truth, and ultimately to bury the profound reality of his actions, leaving a widening trail of disquiet, confusion, and ultimately despair among those who genuinely cared for Danny. For too long, agonizing years, the true location and fate of Little Boy Blue remained an agonizing, unsolved mystery, a silent scream lost in the vastness of the American landscape, an open wound for the community of Chester. Then, in December 1987, a flicker of light, small but persistent, finally pierced the heavy darkness that had enveloped Danny's disappearance. A woman in Wyoming, whose identity was carefully protected from public scrutiny, was reportedly engaged in a mundane act. She was flipping through the pages of a Reader's Digest magazine, a widely circulated publication found in homes across the nation. Her eyes scanned the familiar layouts, past stories of triumph and human interest, until they landed on a national news feature. The article displayed a police sketch of a small boy, an artist's rendering of the hauntingly familiar face of the unknown child, found frozen in Nebraska, the child known to the nation as Little Boy Blue. The very moment her gaze settled on the image, a profound, immediate, and utterly shocking recognition reportedly seized her. It was Danny Stutzman. She had cared for him, had watched him help in the local market, had shared quiet meals with him, and had seen him off with Eli just 2 Christmases prior. The shock was reportedly visceral, a cold, sickening wave washing over her as she comprehended the horrifying, unspeakable connection. The serene face of the sketched boy, combined with her vivid memories, formed an undeniable, heartbreaking link. Without hesitation, her hands reportedly trembling, the woman reportedly composed a letter, carefully addressed to Sheriff Gary Young, the lead investigator on the Little Boy Blue case in Chester, Nebraska. Enclosed with her letter was a crucial piece of evidence, a physical photograph, the last image ever taken of Danny, captured by the adoptive family just before Eli had picked him up from Wyoming. The picture depicted Danny, then 9 years old, a small figure clad in a striped jacket, his dark eyes wide and unsmiling, gazing directly into the camera with that profound, almost unsettling emptiness that had been noted by his temporary caregivers. It was a haunting, final portrait, a testament to a life on the cusp of tragedy. The discovery of this letter was momentous for the investigators. Upon receiving it, Sheriff Young's office reportedly obtained an old-school report card envelope that had once belonged to Danny Pelmer. Prints fingerprints from the palm of the hand carefully lifted from the envelope were meticulously compared against those taken from the small, frozen body of little boy Blue. The results were unequivocal, definitive. The prints matched. After 2 years of heartbreaking anonymity, a national search, and a quiet burial in a stranger's plot, little boy Blue finally had a name: Danny Stutzman. A wave of both profound relief that the mystery was solved and deep sorrow for the tragic truth reportedly washed over the investigators and the small community of Chester, a community that had mourned an unknown child now revealed to them. The mystery of his identity was agonizingly solved, but the deeper tragedy of his death remained a gaping, unhealing wound. With Danny's identity definitively confirmed, the investigation gained renewed, urgent momentum. Sheriff Gary Young, accompanied by investigator Jack Wyant of the Nebraska State Patrol, reportedly traveled from the quiet, rural expanses of Nebraska to the bustling, warmer, and far more anonymous city of Fort Worth, Texas. Their mission was clear, stark, and singular: to locate and apprehend Eli Stutzman. They found him residing in Fort Worth, a man moving through the crowds, seemingly untouched by the frozen fields where his son's body had been abandoned. The arrest reportedly proceeded without incident. Eli offered no resistance, his demeanor reportedly calm, almost unsettlingly detached, a characteristic that had been observed in him before, a placid mask that seemed to conceal a chilling void of emotion. He was read his rights and taken into custody. However, the legal path to justice for Danny's death was immediately fraught with formidable obstacles. The initial autopsy, conducted in the brutal sub-zero cold of that Christmas Eve, had been inconclusive. It had failed to definitively determine the precise cause of death, citing only possibilities such as Ray's syndrome or severe hypothermia, which made it exceedingly difficult to conclusively prove a criminal act beyond a reasonable doubt. Without a clear medical determination of homicide, and in the agonizing absence of a confession from Eli, prosecuting him for murder in Danny's death became an insurmountable legal challenge. The evidence, though circumstantial and deeply suspicious, lacked the irrefutable forensic or confessional link required by law for a homicide conviction. Frustrated by these limitations, Eli Stutzman was ultimately charged, not with murder, but with the lesser, though still serious, offenses of abandoning a human body and concealing a death. He was found guilty and received a sentence of 7 years in state prison, a sentence that many felt did not fully reflect the profound nature of his heinous actions. The sentencing hearing for Eli Stutzman was a somber, intense affair, held in the quiet, stoic atmosphere of a Nebraska courtroom. Eli, present with his defense attorney, William Gallup, reportedly presented his version of the events surrounding Danny's death. He described an ostensibly tragic, accidental scenario. He claimed he had attempted to wake Danny to administer medicine for a respiratory infection, only to discover the boy was already lifeless. His voice reportedly remained even, almost monotonous. He recounted praying over Danny's body for hours, a solitary vigil in a remote, desolate location, before placing the child's small, lifeless form in the ravine and carefully covering him with snow, an act he reportedly described as a desperate, protective attempt to shield his son from further indignity or the harsh elements. His stated rationale for not reporting the death to authorities was reportedly attributed to an overwhelming, paralyzing fear. He claimed he was terrified his family, particularly his conservative Amish relatives, would blame him for not having adequately cared for the boy, a fear that, to many in the courtroom, seemed grossly inadequate and self-serving to explain such a callous act. Prosecutor Daniel Werner, a man known for his sharp intellect, his unwavering commitment, and his tireless pursuit of justice, listened intently to Eli's dispassionate recounting, his gaze never leaving the defendant. As Eli concluded his narrative, Werner reportedly fixed him with a piercing, unwavering gaze and asked a pointed, almost rhetorical question that cut through the placid veneer of Eli's story, stripping away its pretense and exposing the chilling core. "Why didn't you just call the police?" The question hung heavy in the silent courtroom, echoing the disbelief and unspoken outrage of many present. Eli's response, reportedly delivered softly, with an unsettling calmness that seemed to defy the gravity of the moment, only deepened the chilling impression he left. "That's what I still keep asking myself today." His words, devoid of genuine remorse, self-condemnation, or even a flicker of profound emotion, struck many in the courtroom as a cold, dispassionate reflection rather than a tortured admission of guilt. The sheer lack of affect, the almost clinical detachment in his voice, revealed a man who seemed utterly disconnected from the horrifying reality and immense human tragedy of his actions, a void where empathy should have resided. After serving his 7-year sentence in Nebraska for the abandonment and concealment charges related to Danny's death, Eli Stutzman was not a free man. His journey through the justice system continued, his past catching up to him with relentless precision. He was transported to Austin, Texas, where he faced new, more severe charges. The unsolved murder of Glenn Pritchett, his former roommate from May 1985, awaited him, a dark shadow from his transient life. The legal proceedings in Texas were reportedly more conclusive than those in Nebraska. Detective Gary Cutler's meticulous investigation, bolstered by witness testimony, circumstantial evidence, and forensic findings that had been painstakingly compiled over the years, presented a compelling and damning case to the jury. After a trial that reportedly laid bare the sordid complexities of Eli's life outside the Amish community, a jury reportedly found him guilty of Glenn Pritchett's murder. He was sentenced to a substantial 40 years in state prison, a stark and undeniable testament to the gravity of his proven crimes, a measure of justice for at least one of his alleged victims. During his lengthy incarceration within the Texas prison system, Eli occasionally engaged in a peculiar form of communication with his estranged Amish family back in Ohio. He reportedly wrote letters, often printing carefully selected passages of scripture on one side of the paper, perhaps a superficial, almost cynical nod to his roots and a veneer of piety, and then filling the other side with updates about his life within the prison walls, his routines, and his philosophical musings on confinement. These letters reportedly offered glimpses into his daily routine, his reflections on his confinement, but never, it seemed, a true, unvarnished confession or an admission of guilt. Some members of his Amish family, despite the pain, scandal, and profound grief he had brought upon them, reportedly made the difficult, long journey to visit him, driven by a complex mix of familial duty, a lingering, almost desperate hope for repentance, and perhaps an insatiable desire for answers, for truth. They consistently hoped that these visits, these rare moments of direct, unmediated confrontation, might finally prompt him to confess, to unburden himself of the truths they suspected. Yet in every letter, in every visit, Eli reportedly maintained his unwavering innocence. He steadfastly denied the accusations, his placid demeanor unchanging, his carefully constructed facade of denial utterly unwavering. The profound mystery surrounding the full extent of his dark deeds remained intact, sealed behind prison walls and forever locked within Eli Stutzman's enigmatic, unyielding silence, a secret he would reportedly take to his grave. After serving his 40-year sentence in a Texas prison for the murder of Glenn Pritchett, Eli Stutzman, now 52 years old, was granted parole in March 2002. His re-entry into society, after decades behind bars, was not a return to the quiet Amish farmlands of his youth, nor to the anonymous highways he once roamed. Instead, he settled in Fort Worth, Texas, renting a small, nondescript one-bedroom apartment within the Courtyard on Calmont complex. This modest dwelling became his new, confined world, a stark contrast to the vast landscapes he had once traversed. Eli reportedly sought out occasional manual labor, performing odd jobs to sustain himself. However, his life quickly fell into a pattern of substance abuse, specifically crack cocaine. He made no discernible effort to conceal this addiction. The signs of his drug use were reportedly apparent to those around him. His neighbors within the complex, individuals like Gina Robinson, the complex manager, and Bertha Remen, a 61-year-old woman who lived nearby, reportedly found him to be a polite, quiet, and solitary man. Bertha Raymond, in particular, reportedly developed a routine of sharing coffee with Eli in the mornings, their conversation seemingly innocuous, filled with the everyday banalities of apartment life. Eli's presence was largely unremarkable, blending into the background of the complex. A ghost of his former, more turbulent self, yet Eli Stutzman, even in this seemingly subdued phase of his life, remained a man steeped in deception. He reportedly wove a tangled web of contradictory stories about his past, offering different narratives to different people. To one friend, he claimed his time in prison was for drug-related offenses. To others, he admitted to a murder conviction, but vehemently asserted his innocence. To some, he denied ever being married or having children, erasing Ida and Danny from his personal history. To yet another, he claimed to be a widower with an infant son he had left with his Amish family, a poignant echo of his original lie about Danny. He even reportedly claimed to have recently visited this fictitious son, stating they had reconnected and that the son had forgiven him. All these fabrications unfolded while the real Danny, little boy Blue, lay buried in an anonymous grave in a small Nebraska cemetery under the name Matthew. The habit of compulsive lying, cultivated in his youth, remained an integral, unshakable part of his character. As early 2006 transitioned into 2007, Eli's life in the courtyard on Colmont Complex began a noticeable and unsettling deterioration. His apartment, once relatively quiet, reportedly became increasingly busy, a hub for prostitutes and other drug users. The traffic in and out of his small unit grew constant, disturbing the quiet peace of the complex. The signs of his crack cocaine addiction became more pronounced, his physical and mental state visibly declining. When his January 2007 rent check reportedly bounced, Gina Robinson, the complex manager, informed him that he had to vacate the premises. The order to leave seemed to trigger a new phase in Eli's behavior, suggesting either a desperate plan for flight or a macabre premonition of his own end. Eli began to systematically divest himself of his belongings. He reportedly donated precious items to friends, personal possessions that held some sentimental or monetary value. Other things he placed in storage, carefully packed away as if for a future he intended to see. Some items he reportedly pawned, exchanging them for cash, presumably to fund his spiraling drug habit. To one friend, he reportedly gave a distinctive deer antler-handled hunting knife, an object with a primal, unsettling edge. To another, he passed on a green, hard-bound book, reportedly detailing the history of his Amish roots, a strange relic of a life he had so thoroughly rejected and then distorted with his lies. These actions, observed by his neighbors, suggested a man preparing for a significant departure, though its nature remained unclear. On the afternoon of January 31, 2007, a friend named Michael Darshongle reportedly came to visit Eli at his apartment. Upon entering, Michael found Eli on the sofa, covered up to his neck with a blanket. Eli's arms lay outside the blanket, conspicuously visible. His hands reportedly appeared dark, a reddish-brown hue, as if he had deliberately submerged them in iodine. Eli Stutzman, then 56 years old, was dead. The scene inside the apartment reportedly indicated a violent struggle or a messy end. Blood was found in the bathroom, on the floor, and in various other places throughout the small apartment. The medical examiner, conducting the autopsy, ultimately determined Eli's death to be a suicide, specifically an self-inflicted injury. However, several of Eli's neighbors reportedly harbored doubts about this official conclusion. Eli had reportedly been making plans to move, making arrangements that seemed contrary to a person contemplating suicide. Furthermore, no suicide note was found, no final confession, no explanation for his death, only silence. The unsettling ambiguity that had surrounded so much of Eli's life now clung to his death. The lingering shadow of Eli's life extended even to his death. His Amish family in Ohio, contacted by Charles Turner, a friend of Eli's who attempted to make arrangements, reportedly refused to claim his body. Their decision was reportedly articulated with a quiet finality, claiming his body would cause too many wounds, reopening the deep, unhealed scars of his past actions. Eli Stutzman, the bishop's son, the serial liar, the accused murderer, was ultimately buried in a pauper's grave in Texas, far from the rolling hills of Ohio where his life had begun, and worlds away from the quiet cemetery in Nebraska, where Danny, little boy Blue, lay at rest. The legacy of Eli Stutzman, however, continued to reverberate through the lives he had touched and the places he had haunted. In Chester, Nebraska, the community's quiet resolve to honor little boy Blue remained undimmed. People still reportedly visited Danny's grave, leaving behind toys, small cars, and shiny coins, tributes to a life tragically cut short. The town had built a memorial to him on the side of the road, a testament to their enduring compassion. When a tornado reportedly destroyed it, the community came together to rebuild it, their determination unwavering. The memorial proudly bore a logo, a small town with a big heart. In Durango, Colorado, the brutal murders of David Tyler and Dennis Sleeter technically remained unsolved. After Eli's death, the Durango Police Department, including Sergeant Tony Arcoletta, reportedly requested his fingerprints and DNA samples from the Texas Medical Examiner. However, despite their efforts, they were never able to obtain conclusive evidence definitively linking Eli to those crimes. He remained the primary suspect, a persistent shadow on the edges of their open files, but without the finality of a conviction. And in Ohio, the family of Ida Gingrich, particularly her younger brother, Dan Gingrich, continued their tireless campaign for justice. They adamantly sought to have the official cause of Ida's death changed from natural causes to suspicious or homicide. Greg Olson, the author who had dedicated years to investigating the complex layers of Eli's story, publicly stated his belief that sufficient evidence existed to warrant a reclassification. Just because she was Amish doesn't mean she didn't deserve justice, he reportedly observed, his words echoing the family's plea. Eli Stutzman was formally convicted of only one murder, that of Glenn Pritchett. Yet he remained a prime suspect in at least 5 deaths: Ida, Danny, Glenn Pritchett, David Tyler, and Dennis Sleeter. Perhaps more. Retired Sheriff Gary Young, the man who had found Danny's body on that frigid Christmas Eve so long ago, reportedly still thought about the case, about the questions that remained unanswered. Maybe he finally had a conscience. Young reportedly speculated about Eli's suicide, his voice tinged with a weariness that spoke of years grappling with unfathomable evil. Maybe he couldn't live with himself anymore, but no one knew for certain. And now, with Eli's death, no one ever would. It's going to be a mystery for a lifetime, Chuck Cleveland, the man who found Danny in the ravine, reportedly stated, his words encapsulating the enduring enigma. The unsettling quiet that often followed Eli Stutzman, however, seemed to carry an echo. In the years after Danny's death, some residents of Chester reportedly began to report strange experiences near the very spot where his small body had been discovered. Drivers passing by the remote dirt road at night spoke of seeing a faint, pale blue light floating near the ravine, always on Christmas Eve, or very close to that date, a spectral glow in the desolate winter landscape. Others reported feeling a sudden, overwhelming wave of sadness as they passed the roadside memorial, as if an unseen presence sought to communicate its enduring sorrow. At the cemetery where Danny, buried as Matthew, lay at rest, some people reportedly claimed to have seen a small, indistinct figure standing near his headstone at dawn, always turning away when approached, always vanishing before its face could be clearly discerned. The toys left on his grave by compassionate townspeople were sometimes found rearranged, shifted in subtle ways, even when the cemetery had been empty of living visitors. And at the farmhouse in Ohio, where Ida had died, whispers continued to circulate about strange sounds emanating from the barn on hot July nights. Hurried footsteps, a woman's voice calling for help. But when anyone went to investigate, no one was there. Only the rustling wind and the persistent, chilling memory of a night in 1977 when every lamp in the house glowed and a pregnant woman in her daytime clothes was carried from a burning barn. Some Amish in the area still spoke of these occurrences, though only amongst themselves, in hushed, reverent tones. They reportedly believed that some souls could not rest when justice remained undone, that some stories clamored to be told, even when those who lived them were no longer present to speak, even in Fort Worth. In the small, one-bedroom apartment where Eli Stutzman had died, subsequent tenants reportedly reported vivid, disturbing nightmares. Dreams of a small boy with dark eyes, clad in blue pajamas, standing silently in the corner of the room. He never spoke, only watched. And when they awoke, they reportedly felt a profound, bone-deep cold that should not have existed in the Texas heat, a cold reminiscent of a Nebraska Christmas Eve. When temperatures plummeted below zero and snow covered the empty fields, a chilling, persistent presence that refused to dissipate. The legacy of Eli Stutzman was not merely a collection of unsolved cases and unanswered questions, but a persistent, haunting echo in the silent, shadowed corners of the world. Eli Stutzman's final chapter closed not with a confession, nor with the grand revelation of his many secrets, but in the unsettling quiet of a small Fort Worth apartment. Found by a friend, his body bore the marks of a violent end, an official determination of suicide by self-inflicted injury. Yet, the absence of a note, coupled with his stated plans to move, left a lingering doubt in the minds of those who observed him. His Amish family, unwilling to reopen old wounds, reportedly refused to claim his remains, leaving Eli to be laid to rest in an unmarked pauper's grave, far from the land of his birth, and worlds away from the small Nebraska cemetery, where Danny, his son, rested under the name Matthew. The silence that Eli Stutzman so meticulously cultivated throughout his life, a silence woven from lies and evasions, continues to echo. It is a silence that speaks of unfinished narratives, of justice unserved, and of truths that claw at the surface, refusing to remain buried. The ripples of his life, and the deaths connected to it, continue to spread across the heartland. A small town in Nebraska still tends a memorial to a boy they knew only as Little Boy Blue. A family in Ohio still whispers of a pregnant woman lost in a barn fire, and her brother champions a truth that formal records deny. And in Colorado, 2 men's disappearances remain cold cases, forever shadowed by a presence that slipped through the grasp of the law. What unspoken terrors do you believe Eli Stutzman carried with him to his grave? Do you think the lingering shadows and strange occurrences reported in these places are mere coincidence, or a testament to the weight of unresolved suffering? Share your thoughts in the comments below. For more chilling echoes from the past, step into another untold story from our archives. Doubt if these whispers from the forgotten corners of history resonated with you. Remember to like this video and subscribe to Host of Silence for more narratives that linger long after they're told.